Okay. Okay, Bates. Dusan.
Here.
Llewellyn.
Here.
Freeman.
Here.
Harrison.
Here.
Socher.
Here.
Kirkham. Learned.
Here.
Lindsley.
Here.
Norman.
Here.
Olinger. Messina.
Here.
Pennifield. Boucher.
Here.
Shaw.
Here.
Schubert.
Here.
Skanes. Who's the other one today? Oh, Angola. That's right. It's the Angola trip. Spates.
Here.
Teets.
Here.
McNair.
Here.
Winsel.
Here.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. That's right. A big group of students are going to they're going to prison in Louisiana, the Angola State Penitentiary in Louisiana, and I have been there. Has anyone done the Angola trip before?
Is it active or is it shut down?
No, it's a real prison. It's a real thing. Has anyone been on the Angola trip?
What's it for?
It's for criminal justice. And Courtney, I'm sorry, I've got a tablet there that's taking up some space.
This one's
And
my
my
spot.
sociology class is
So
going.
my spot's good.
Okay. The criminal justice students take a trip over to the Angola Penitentiary in Louisiana, and they go through it, and some other students do too. I think sociology. What makes it really neat is you just kind of get to see the way an actual prison functions, which I'm assuming none of you know from firsthand experience, and it is definitely worth seeing because it is very different from what you actually think a prison is. It's very different from that. So neat. But we need to talk about Civ 2.
Although it'd be a real scheme for you.
Okay. Regarding our exam, you already know that we will not be having an exam on Friday. We went over that already. I am not going to have an exam. We could if we wanted to, but I'm not going to have an exam the Monday after spring break. I've always promised that I'm not going to do that to my students, and so I won't do that to you.
We appreciate your integrity.
Yeah, you bet. I'm here to serve. But we will have our exam Wednesday, so it'll be the Wednesday after spring break.
2 weeks from now.
2 weeks from now. Yes, 2 weeks from now. And as you know, you won't be here next
So
week.
the 25th.
25th. Now, when we talked before, we were discussing, if I'm not mistaken, the very end of the Reign of Terror, and then the once again coming to power of the Thermidorians. Correct? Yes. Just making sure. And the key about this to remember is when looking across the spectrum of what happened beginning in 1789 and then moving. Oh, there we go. So you're not in prison after all. We thought you were.
If you were in prison, they would all know their history very well by the end of it.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point. Well, it is an interesting tour, though. You know about the Angola trip, don't you?
No, I see no reason to go visit that.
There's a big group that are touring Angola today. Anyway, back to what we were saying before. Between 1789 and obviously 1795, when a semblance of order was restored, a lot of people learned that having a revolution is generally a lot more complicated than you might think. And there's a lot of different elements about this to discuss. Obviously, the original bourgeoisie middle class that began the revolution, hoping to see it as constitutional reform, were not really thinking ahead. They didn't really understand that there's going to be other groups as well that have to be represented. And as the revolution becomes more radical, we find these more radical political parties accusing the bourgeoisie of just simply becoming another nobility. And in some respects, they were correct. I wouldn't say they were 100% correct, but you get the idea. And what eventually happened is the Enlightenment, reason, rationality, all of this was brought into the revolution, but a society based purely on logic and reason, as Robespierre would have envisioned, as Robespierre did envision, turns out that's not going to work either. Because ultimately, you can't preach liberty unless you do what? Practice it. right? You have to practice liberty. And the Committee of Public Safety and the Jacobins were not really willing to do that. And so the revolution went radical for a variety of reasons. But what we do need to understand is that by 1795, the old regime was definitely gone. It was not going to come back. France will go through several more governments over the next 2 decades, and there will never be a return to the old regime. And in that sense, the Enlightenment did find its way in. Now we have to start the second part of the French Revolution, and that, of course, involves this fellow right here that everyone has heard of. And by the way, I don't know if I said it already, but this is the Nearpod code. Okay, who in here's already logged in? Got a few of you.
Hold on, I lost it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's the Nearpod code, so feel free to log into that if you want. So everybody in here knows about Napoleon in some respects. Everybody's heard about him. He's one of those iconic figures in more modern history. So let's get into who he actually was as a person. First of all, Napoleon was not completely French. Napoleon wasn't really French. He was born in Corsica. He was Corsican.
Where's Corsica?
It is an island south of France that is ethnically Frenchish Italian. It's a little bit of both.
It's right above Sardinia.
It's right above Sardinia, exactly.
He's from where?
Corsica.
Could you spell it?
Sure.
Is that spelled like it sounds?
Yeah, it's spelled like it sounds. Now understand, at this time, Corsica was part of France. So Napoleon was most definitely a French citizen. Yes.
What language do they speak?
French.
Okay.
French. But they also speak Italian. You know, it's a blend of cultures. But French is definitely the language spoken there. There is a Corsican accent. It is an Italianish version.
I was going to say, didn't they laugh at Napoleon?
Yeah, they did. And he caught a little heat. Exactly. He caught heat over the years because he had the Corsican accent, and that was not something that he appreciated. But he was most definitely a French citizen. He was born to minor nobility. His parents were in the club, but they were on the low level of the nobility totem pole. For the most part, you would consider Napoleon middle class. So even though his family had the noble status, he was really raised as a bourgeoisie, raised in the middle class. Not surprisingly, he was given a very good education growing up, and he was an excellent student. He was given a very good education growing up, and he was an excellent student. As a young man, he was trained in military academies. He was given a training in the military arts. This was, again, very common for lesser nobility. The idea being you get trained in the military academy, you then become an officer in the French army and spend time in the army, but then later on in life you can assume your position as a nobleman.
He grew up in a military academy?
He didn't grow up in a military academy, but he was educated in a military academy. And this was extremely common for the nobility, particularly the lower nobility, and even a lot of the middle class. And so he's following the pattern that was definitely normal at the time. He was, again, a very, very good student. His instructors at this academy were very aware of the fact that this young cadet clearly has a lot of talent. And what you need to understand is that military academies don't just teach how to fight wars. Military academies teach a comprehensive education. You get educated in everything. As a matter of fact, the number one subject that they teach is going to be math and engineering, because you have to be able to build forts and things of that nature on the battlefield. His specialty was artillery. His specialty was artillery. Yes.
Have you ever seen the movie My Immortal Beloved?
My Immortal Beloved.
Yes. It's about Beethoven.
Yeah, I've seen the Beethoven. Yeah.
Can they go through all that? I was just thinking about it because they have that scene when he's talking to that lady and then the whole house blows up. And they're cursing Napoleon and stuff.
Right, I remember that. Yeah, that's exactly right. My Immortal Beloved. What that movie was all about is, I mentioned earlier Amadeus. The movie Amadeus came out in I believe, 1984, and it's a fantastic movie. It won a whole bunch of Oscars. And My Immortal Beloved is kind of the Beethoven version of Amadeus. They said, Amadeus was so good, so we're going to make a Beethoven version of that. It didn't do quite as well at the box office. It didn't turn out to be as big a movie, but it was a good movie. I thought it was great.
Someone gave it to me. I'd never heard of it. I love it now. It's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it didn't make the splash that Amadeus did, but it is a good movie. It's definitely worth it. As a matter of fact, I ought to put it on the list. Now that I think about it, that would be a good movie for a movie. Well, anyway, so Napoleon is a young officer in the French military, and of course the revolution breaks out. The revolution breaks out. He is about 20 when the Estates General meets. He is about 20 when the Estates General meets. And he supports the middle class. When it really gets down to it, he is in with the bourgeoisie.
About 20 when what meets?
When the Estates General meets. And of course, as we recall, in 1792, France goes to war with Austria and Prussia. So of course, what does that mean for Napoleon?
He's at war.
He's at war. He is out on the battlefield, and he very quickly distinguishes himself as a very talented young officer. He very clearly distinguishes himself as somebody who knows what he's doing on the battlefield.
He signs himself with the middle class?
Yes, and he unapologetically supports the revolution. He is very, very patriotic in terms of his desire to defend France, but also defend the reforms that have taken place. But understand, he is nothing more than a young officer at this point. He is not a national figure of any note. Nobody really knows who he is outside of his circle of friends.
He fought the war with Austria and Prussia?
Yes. So how does he move ahead so much more quickly? Well, when we left off with the last lecture, the Thermidorians were in charge, right? The reign of terror had ended. We now have a return to stability, and to a large extent, the bourgeoisie that had started the revolution are back. They have written a new constitution. But remember, there are the monarchists on one side that would really like to see a return to the monarchy, and then there are the more radicals on the other that would like to see the revolution go in another direction. In 1795, there was a riot / demonstration in Paris. And it was held by royalists. It was held by royalists.
Demonstration where?
In Paris. And it was held by royalists. And it got pretty ugly. And there was a genuine fear that the government might be overthrown, or this might turn out worse. So they called in the local garrison to disperse the mob. And who do you think was the young officer in charge of the local garrison? Napoleon. And Napoleon's specialty is? Artillery. Napoleon and his men rolled the artillery into the streets of Paris, pointed them at the crowd, and kaboom. He just blew them apart.
God, I hope they weren't using grape shot.
They weren't.
Great.
As a matter of fact, he bragged about that. He said, I negotiated with a whiff of grape shot. And of course, the mob was dispersed, and Napoleon then made it very clear, if you ever need a mob dispersed, you just call me. But the Thermidorians are in charge. We are going to have stability. And the message was sent. We are not going to have mobs in Paris at this particular point. So what does the Thermidorian leadership think of Napoleon?
Oh, he's just great.
Oh, now you better believe it. And so now, excuse me, he gets national attention. He gets national attention. And he is promoted as sort of this national hero that saved the government in Paris. And a lot of people appreciate this. If anything, they appreciate the fact that he restored order. We were about to have some sort of other chaotic event, and order has been restored. And after the reign of terror, you can understand there's a lot of people in France that appreciate the kind of order a talented young officer can bring. So Napoleon boosted his career. As sort of a reward for this, he was given the command of a group of French forces in Italy. He was elevated on the command scale.
He was rewarded with what?
He was given a command of a group of French forces in Italy. And there is this understanding, of course, that this young man is going places. There is this understanding that this young man is going places.
So you're seen as a hero after?
Oh, yes. In 1797, 2 years after making this name for himself, Napoleon held a meeting with the leaders in Paris. Of course, I'm keeping this simple, but that's all right. Napoleon held a meeting with the leaders in Paris. And his message to them was grim. His message to them was not necessarily what they wanted to hear. Here's what he basically said. In order for France to be stable, we have to have constitutional government. We need law, we need order. And the middle class have it right. The bourgeois middle class that have set up this government. Obviously, I am a 100% supporter of this.
In order for France to be stable, you need what?
We need constitutional government and what we're doing here. But see, here's the problem. This government is ultimately unpopular. What we're trying to do, there's a lot of enemies there. Once again, there are monarchists that would really like to see the Bourbons brought back. And they are unapologetic about it. They want to. There are, of course, the radicals. Robespierre may be gone, but that doesn't mean that the people that supported him are all gone. It's not going to take much to rouse up another group of them. And you see, we're a democracy now, aren't we? Right? France is a democracy. We have elections. We have an assembly that is elected. And no political party, no political ideology is permanently in power in a democracy. Right? So basically, we're one election away from losing all of this. What's going to happen if the monarchists take control of the assembly? We're going to have a king. Right? What's going to happen if the radicals take control of the assembly? Reign of terror, fire up the guillotines. It's going to happen one way or the other because that's politics. That's how it works. Right? In our country, Democrats and Republicans go back and forth, don't they? They always have, always will. So Napoleon says, we've got to do something to get the French people behind us, even those that might oppose us politically. We need something that will boost the popularity of this particular government, because we cannot lose elections during this fragile time. Of course, they look at it and you make a good point. Can't argue with the logic here. But what are we going to do about it? Again, this is a democracy. Napoleon says, I've got an idea. What we need to do is deliver victory. We need to prove to the French people that this government can win. Ultimately, in 92, the Girondins wanted to go to war because nothing rallies the people like a good war, right? Nothing rallies the people like a good victory. You want to prove you've got it together, deliver a win, and people take you seriously. See if I've got the right map here. So he says, we've got to deliver a victory. Say, well, what victory could that be? What's this? Egypt. He says, we need to deliver the French people Egypt. What? Why on earth would we want to give the French people Egypt? Here's why we want to give the French people Egypt. Egypt is a British colony. Egypt is a British colony. Get to the right map. And over the past 50 years or so, Britain and France have gone back and forth on the whole colonial thing, right? We had the war of, we had the 7 Years' War, the French and Indian War, where France lost everything. But then, of course, France got some sweet revenge when the American Revolution happened and Britain lost North America. But France was humiliated when France lost India to the British. France was humiliated by the 7 Years' War. And of course, the French people have always believed we're the most powerful nation here, between us and Britain, but somehow Britain won this. And so he says, if we can deliver the French people something that is valuable, something that causes the British to lose and the British to be embarrassed, I guarantee you, you folks will be in power for a generation or more. You will be heroes permanently. Now, we can't get India. Can't do it. India is now British. And I know this map isn't perfect, but Egypt is about right here, isn't it? Right? There is going to be a canal cut between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. And it's going to be called the Suez Canal. And everybody can see it happening. And everybody knows that this is technically possible at this point. Whoever owns Egypt is going to be the possessor of one of the best waterways on the planet. Egypt is an incredibly valuable asset. The British have it. We want it. And here's another nice little thing about this. The French Navy can just come right down here, right? The English Navy has to go all the way around and through Gibraltar. So if we can bottle the British Navy out, the French can go down, take Egypt from the British, victory, we win, and I'm going to be honest with you, it won't even be particularly difficult.
Egypt has what canal?
Well, Egypt is going to have a canal between the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean. Everybody knows that this is possible, and it's kind of in the works to be done. And so Napoleon says, you know, from a military point of view, and I'm a military guy, this doesn't look like it would be particularly difficult. It doesn't look like it would be, if we can get an army there, if we can keep the British Navy out, problem solved, I guarantee you we will be in power for years. It's a great idea. Well, what do you think the Thermidorian government thought about it? Obviously they went along, right? The one thing we need to know about Napoleon is that he was a brilliant field general. He was absolutely the best military mind of his generation. He rewrote the book on how to fight battles on the battlefield. Nobody disputes that. They're called Napoleonic tactics for a reason. He was a terrible naval planner. He completely did not understand how navies work. He completely did not understand how to fight naval battles. He always won on land, but once boats are involved, forget about it. Well, anyway, 35,000 men were sent to Egypt under Napoleon's command to take it from the British.
How many?
35,000.
How many boats does that equal?
Quite a few.
Wait, we're sent from who?
From France.
Okay.
You know, they're sent to Egypt to take Egypt from the British.
Okay, so they have Egypt right now.
Well, they invaded. I wouldn't say they haven't. You'd have to ask the British about that.
I mean the British. Like
The British have it, yes. Egypt is a British colony.
It's just not secure.
No, it's very secure. That's the next part about this.
So he's saying he can just wipe them out and take it?
What's that?
So he's saying he can wipe them out and take it without a problem?
He says it won't be particularly difficult, but it's all depending on naval ability. Because if the British can get their navy there, the British are going to keep it. If the British navy is kept out, then the French can have it. It's all about supply. You know how you know this is distance. And it wasn't just soldiers. Napoleon brought with him scholars and researchers. There's a big renewed interest in ancient Egypt at this time. Remember we talked about the Rosetta Stone, right? The Rosetta Stone was discovered by, y'all connecting the dots. Yeah, the Rosetta Stone was discovered on this expedition by French scholars. Now, it wasn't deciphered for many decades, but they were the ones that actually found it. And so that was the one good thing that came out of this. The reality was the French troops were completely unprepared for fighting in the desert. They were completely unprepared for this. It turned out to be an absolute disaster. And the worst part about it was the one thing that, of course, I've said several times that you always have to remember: don't mess with the British Navy. It's just that simple. The British Navy came down, obliterated the French fleet. So now Napoleon has 35,000 men in Egypt, which he cannot resupply and he cannot get home. And the British are now going to start landing their own soldiers, which they can resupply, connect the dots. It turned out to be a nightmare.
So who had the advantage fighting the desert? The British?
Well, neither necessarily had an advantage, but the British were able to resupply their men to the French were. The French fleet was obliterated. It was the Battle of the Nile, and of course the British Navy is going to take care of it.
So how many of the 35,000 made it home?
Not many. Napoleon did, but he came back with his tail between his legs. And so now, instead of delivering the victory, Napoleon has just delivered a very embarrassing defeat. Now what do the Thermidorians do?
They hate him. They kill him.
Or they can be politicians about it. Because remember, if they associate themselves with this, then they're going to be blamed too, right? So they did what politicians like to do. They just lied, called it a big victory, had big victory parades, and figured the people are going to forget about it within a year or two anyway. And it worked. Napoleon was declared this great conqueror, and the fact that we don't currently control Egypt was politely forgotten. So now Napoleon is even stronger than he was before, despite failing miserably.
Did he tell them that he lost, or did he tell them he won?
Oh, everybody knew what was really going on. The people that were really studying this, yes. But you have to keep in mind, the public has a very short memory. It does. It does. I want you to tell me the most important news stories from 2012. Anyone?
Snowden.
Was that?
The oil spill?
Maybe, right? Snowden, maybe. You see what I'm saying? Right? How about 2013? What happened in July of 2013?
4th of July.
Hey. Aside from the 4th of July. You see what I'm saying? We don't remember things. We tend to forget pretty quickly. So they figured, you know what? If we gloss over this in a few months, nobody's going to remember it. Ferguson. Hey, there we go. Yes. Was that 2013?
2014. You said 14, didn't you?
No, 13.
Oh, well, I don't know.
And I got it on tape too, so. No, yeah.
So the French lost in Egypt?
Well, they never got it. So here's the deal. Napoleon is now even more powerful than he was before.
Why?
Because of this. He's now a national hero.
Why they didn't win?
Like I said, they lied about it.
They told everybody.
And I am simplifying it, but that's the basic idea. Now, I'm going to gloss over a lot of what happens next, but obviously we know that Napoleon is ambitious. We know that he has intentions that are well beyond democracy. By 1799, Napoleon and two others had taken control of the French government as a triumvirate. Kind of like Caesar.
What year?
1799.
What is that word you said?
A triumvirate. A three-man rule.
Can you write that on the board?
Sure.
Took over France and created a triumvirate?
Triumvirate. Oh.
That's the kind of government they formed?
Yeah.
And two others, Napoleon and two others.
A three-man control. And a new constitution was written, giving them tremendous amounts of power. So basically, we've got a three-man government that's running France. Now, everybody knows who's really in charge.
What did the British have to say about the...
I don't know. Do you think if they had spies in France,
What? The British did have spies. I mean, the British knew what was going on. Everybody.
The Constitution was written, you said?
Yeah, new Constitution was written.
So you told me that nobody threw up their little,
Napoleon is a national hero. He's bringing order. He's bringing stability, right? And of course, nobody wants a return to the reign of terror. And so if you start stirring up the government, there's no telling what could happen next. And so law and order and stability were considered more important.
So does that make him look like a hero?
Oh, yes. Now, Napoleon is given a title, First Consul. He is given a title, First Consul.
Did the other two get a
Sounds
title?
familiar.
Oh, I'm sure they got titles too. So, everybody understands that Napoleon is calling the shots now. Everybody knows he's really in charge.
First Consul?
Consul.
C-O-N.
S-U-L.
Thank you.
In 1802, he is given this title for life. He is made First Consul for life.
Basically, he's made king.
Well, not yet. Being a king isn't good enough for him.
Let's just put the laurels on his head, throw him a triumph, and call him Imperator.
There we go. That'll be next. We know that. The next obvious step.
He kills off the two other guys.
What's that?
He kills off.
No, he didn't kill them off. But in 1804, Napoleon crowns himself Emperor of the French. In 1804, Napoleon crowns himself Emperor of the French. In a grand ceremony, he is the new monarch. And this ceremony is a big deal. Not just in the sense that we are now restoring the monarchy, right? And this ain't the Bourbons, right? This is something entirely different. But there's a lot to this. There's a lot to this. What's best known about this is that it was symbolically quite different from the other coronation ceremonies that had taken place in France. You see, generally, the man that crowns the French king is the Pope. Right? And what happens is there's, obviously an enormous ceremony, and the king, walks down the aisle, and he kneels down, and the Pope puts the crown on the head and, does some sort of blessing, right? The idea there being God has ordained you king of the French people. Are you following me? Well, we've got the Pope here, right? Napoleon walks down the aisle. He doesn't kneel. He takes the crown, turns around, puts it on his own head. What's Napoleon saying?
I made myself.
That's right. This is me.
Like you did Charlemagne.
That's right. That's right. Because, of course, when the Pope puts the crown on the head, that means the Pope can take the crown off the head. And Napoleon is saying to the Pope, you are not the one who decided I'm king or emperor. Now, the Pope knew that he was going to do this. The legend had always been that the Pope expected to crown him and Napoleon snatched it from him. But the Pope knew in advance this is what's going to happen. And there's nothing that the Pope can do about it. We'll get into that a little bit later.
I think it would have been much more fun if he didn't know.
Oh, it would have been a lot more entertaining. There's no question about that. Of course, also, the crown from Napoleon was very different from typical French crowns, and we've gone through this before, but we'll just we'll go through it again. You'll notice this is a Roman style leaf thing. It is not the typical French crown. The French crown has the cross on the top, and of course, there's no cross on the top of this. This is Napoleon's portrait here, all in his coronation regalia. The little medallion there demonstrates that, yes, he is the ruler of the French people. We know that this was something that would have been difficult to put on and posing for all of this. But, of course, that means we're just going to maybe do one more, right? Hand outstretched, right? Maybe we'll do this one right front and center, right? Notice we've got the ball, right, with the cross, right? What's the hand? The stick's got a hand on it. Anybody know what that symbolizes?
The right hand.
Justice. The hand of justice. Of course, hand on the hip. Let's step back. How about this one? I'm going to hold the ball, right? Yes, this is my ball.
Like a globe?
Yeah, like a globe. Yeah, and it represents Christendom on earth. Now I'm tired, so I'll sit down.
Yeah, it looks like a superhero.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Okay, now I'm going to step back and be awesome.
See, that was a terrible idea, that picture.
How long would each one of those take?
That's the trick. That's the trick. Yeah, you can. But see, the idea here is you kind of get the idea of the ego we're talking about, right? If he's going to have all of these royal portraits commissioned, and the idea would be they would be on display in different parts of France, and so you can understand that. But this is not the one. This is not a man who says, "I'll do one every few years." This is a guy who says, "I am this awesome, so let's do every one." It's like that. It's like he's a fashion model, posing for the camera in all these different positions. Now, of course, again, I know that we've gone over this before, but let's just revisit it. What is the cut of this? The style. This is not in the style of what you would see under one of the Louis. What's the style of this? Roman, exactly. Napoleon was obsessed with ancient Rome. Napoleon was absolutely obsessed with it. In his mind, he is not going to be the ruler of the French. He is going to be someone who rebuilds Rome, a new Roman Empire, and he is, of course, going to be the Caesar. And so this is the style, and again, you just look at the, we've got our Roman patrician here, and you can see the similarity between Napoleon's coronation robes and what a Roman patrician would have worn, because that's what he's so obsessed with. But there's more to it. When the other people were in here and I went over this, I left a few things out on purpose. So there's more to this that you probably didn't notice, but don't worry, we'll get there. He wants to look like, Octavian, or maybe, I don't know, Gludius Maximus, this guy, or maybe Belushi, right? Napoleon is interested in this.
Who's that? Who's Belushi?
That's from Animal.
yeah. You've seen that, haven't you?
A what?
Okay, well, yeah.
It's a movie.
You will.
It's a great movie that you
Yeah.
should probably add to that list.
It is on the list. No, that's on the list.
Animal House is on the list?
Of course it is. Yeah, Animal
I keep
House is on
saying
the
we
movie
go
list.
check out
That's
this
awesome.
list.
You've got to check out the list. You've got to check
I
out the
Haven't
list.
checked out the list.
I haven't looked at the list, no, I have to check it.
Yeah, you have to look. No, but there's more to Animal House than you think. I mean, it's obviously a ridiculous movie, but there's actually a lot more to it when you start looking at the dynamics involved in it. There's a lot of racial dynamics in Animal House. You know, you look at this, but there's one thing that you've probably never thought about. Everybody's seen it before, right? Everybody, well, not everybody, but who in here has definitely seen Animal House beginning to end? What year is Animal House set in? What's the year?
In the 80s?
No,
It's like what,
It's almost in the
68, 62 or something?
62.
Oh,
62.
60s.
What happened in 1963 that, of course, changed American history? John F. Kennedy was assassinated, and so they deliberately chose 1962, and the writer said that's the year, you know, the last year that we're innocent. You know, that's the last year that we can do this. And so Animal House is representing the kind of the end of an era, if you will, because after 1963, everything about America changes as a result of the Kennedy assassination, and we get into the 60s, and you know, you just can't have Animal House anymore. It's different. So there's more to that. But anyway, we have our Roman victory arches, right? You can zoom in on your devices there. You have lots of Latin. They do this whenever they win a big victory or do something really awesome because they're Roman. And these are the ancient victory arches. But of course, Napoleon had to build his own because he is rebuilding Rome. So we have the Arc de Triomphe, which Napoleon intended to be the centerpiece of Paris. Boy, howdy, would he be angry today if he showed up and realized that it isn't, right? But oh well, right?
He built that for what?
Yes, he commissioned the Arc de Triomphe, you know, the new victory arch for the new Rome that Napoleon is putting together. Napoleon was absolutely brilliant at balancing his popularity among the different populations. He was brilliant in putting policies together that effectively made everybody happy.
Why is it purple?
Oh, that's just the lighting. That's just it's at night. This is a nighttime picture.
Okay, so it's just an angle of something.
Yeah, it's just the angle and the lens of the camera. Yeah, that's a nighttime shot.
I made policies that made everyone happy.
To a large extent, remember the different classes of people. The different classes of people. He was very smart at being able to do this. And so we're going to talk about the various ways in which he kept all the different classes within French society happy and effectively pacified. And he made no secret of the fact that he sought glory for France. You know, and of course, by default, glory for himself. He said that the French Revolution is not something that's just going to affect France. We are going to reshape how Europe works, and France will be the center of this. France will be the center model of a new Europe where the revolution goes everywhere. And he put every one of these old school monarchs on notice. You know, your days are numbered. You're either going to cooperate with this or you're going to go down. That was his logic, and so the people of France absolutely loved this. Now, in terms of his ability to manage France, in terms of his just leadership ability, his administrative ability, there is no disputing the fact that Napoleon was an absolute genius. There is no question about it. He was a very, very intelligent man and a very competent administrator. He wasn't just a genius on the battlefield. In terms of just the nuts and bolts bureaucracy of how to run a government, Napoleon was good at it. He was very good at it. Just a highly, highly intelligent man.
Would you say he's the best one in all history of?
I wouldn't say he's the best. It's hard to say that. You know, it's hard to say who's the best because different leaders have different styles. Yeah, and I'm not saying he was a good person morally. You know, I mean, millions of people died because of this guy. But you know, don't say that he wasn't intelligent.
As far as him not liking the monarchs, would Britain be included in that?
Oh, I think that he would definitely say yes. There's no doubt there. Because in a larger sense, he wants every state in Europe to effectively recognize France as the center. And so he wants to be in control of all of it. He wants to be in control of all of it. So even though, yes, Britain is a constitutional monarchy and Britain falls in line with what the revolution should be about, obviously there's a problem with that. And that's the bigger debate that we have to have. We're not having it right now, but we'll bring this up later. Did Napoleon preserve the revolution or did he undermine it? Because you can make an argument on both sides of it, right? If the purpose of the revolution was to end absolute monarchy, obviously we have a problem here, don't we? Napoleon pretty much undermined it completely. But at the same time, Napoleon puts in a lot of reforms that are very much in line with what the revolutionary spirit was all about. Now, I'll give you my own opinion at the very end. But that is the debate that people have to have. Did he undermine the revolution or did he preserve the revolution? So, as emperor, Napoleon reconstructs France to his liking. France simply becomes an extension of his personality. He's like Louis XIV. What I want gets done, period, across the board.
He reconstructs it to his liking?
Reconstructs France to his liking. Now, obviously, this is a version of France that will come along a little bit later after he has done a healthy bit of conquering. But it's a good map to show how he chose to administer France. For one thing, he centralized the government. He centralized the government, making Paris the center of all administrative and economic affairs. Everything takes place from Paris. And if you're wondering, no, he did not live at Versailles. He had very little to do with Versailles. He visited every once in a while, but he was not interested in being associated with it.
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, he did not want to be associated with the Bourbons. This is a new France, an entirely new era.
So
I'm surprised he didn't tear it down.
Yeah, that is kind of, yeah, but no, I think the French people would have been upset about that.
True.
It is, and it would have taken quite a bit to rip that down. I mean, it is a city after all. So, but Versailles sort of fell into disrepair for a while. It was basically maintained. As a matter of fact, one understand parts of it were kept as stables and things like that. It was not a residence that he had much interest in. He divided France into districts, logical, organized districts with an administrator, a governor in charge of each one.
France or Paris?
France. You can see here, there's a whole series of logical districts.
What is that light blue one?
Which one? Oh, gee, I can't see.
The big one to the right.
That one?
The Swiss
Illyrian.
Confederation.
The Illyrian provinces,
No.
yes.
Swiss
the
Confederation.
Illyrian
No.
provinces.
Swiss Confederation.
Oh, that's Switzerland.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's Switzerland. Switzerland's neutral, of course. Switzerland is an independent state.
They're really good at being neutral.
They are good at being neutral. Well, they're good at being neutral because everybody else respects them as being neutral. All the other nations have decided, okay, we're going to let them be neutral.
They got a lot of hills to walk up.
A lot of hills, yeah, there are a lot of hills to walk up. That's about right. Yeah. Now, if you'll recall, who was another leader of Western Europe that divided the state into districts to make it more efficient? Anybody remember? This goes back to Civ 1, of course. This doesn't look all that different, actually. How about Charlemagne? Right? He divided this region. And again, this is the same place. Same place. And so, France is thinking, I'm going to be logical about this. Rome, of course, was divided into districts with governors and of course, a centralized city that controlled everything, and we know what that city was. But it ain't going to be Rome now. It's going to be Paris.
Didn't he know that Rome fell?
Yes, he did. Yeah, oh, most definitely. Most definitely.
But
A book was written just before this, just before Napoleon, and he almost certainly would have been a fan of it. And it was called The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. I mentioned that in Civ 1, written by Gibbon. Yeah, that was published and rather popular at this time. And so Napoleon looked at it. Now,
what book?
Oh, The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. You remember that one from Civ 1. Now, Napoleon eliminated the free press. He eliminated the free press. Oh, let me do that. He eliminated the free press. You do not print criticism of what he is doing. You do not print criticism of what he is doing. The papers pretty much printed what he wanted. The papers were just a bunch of Napoleon propaganda. I'm going to be honest with you. He notoriously didn't even read newspapers because he argued they only print what I want them to anyway, so why bother? I'm busy. I have other things to do. In terms of the church, obviously the church is very important in France. Personally, he was not particularly religious. He didn't really hold a lot of religious faith. As an individual, he was not a devout Catholic.
That way he didn't have the cross on his crown.
Well, remember, the church is not putting him in charge. He wants to make sure the church understands you are not in charge, I am. And so he keeps the cross off the crown, and he keeps all that religious imagery as low as he can. He did have the ball and all that. He did acknowledge the church, but the idea is, I'm in charge, not the church. And this is not an alliance like it had been with the Louis, where we share power. This is me. I am in charge. That's the idea.
Did he allow
I'm sorry?
more religion?
Yes. Yes, and this is what we're getting to. He understood that the church is a very powerful tool to keep people under control. He knew that. He knew that the church is a method to control people. And so the church understood that as long as the church is cooperative, it can function. But of course, there is freedom of religion now. People can worship any way they want. They don't have to go. They don't have to tithe.
So what rules did he make? Freedom of religion well?
Yeah, oh yeah. You know, and that was part of the revolutionary spirit, of course. But here's the one thing that Napoleon made very clear, and I told y'all to remember this. What did the government do with that new constitution after the old regime was gone? What was one of the first things the government did?
Everybody equal? No.
With regards to the church. That really anchored the church?
It's all
Took the property. Exactly. All church property had been confiscated. Napoleon did not give it back. The church wanted Napoleon to give them their property back, give the church's property back. Napoleon said no. You know, those sales are final. That land is gone. And he made it clear that the church does not get its property back. Napoleon reformed French education. Napoleon reformed French education.
What would the church have done with all that money? I mean, all the land anyway?
Make money from it.
Just
What's that?
they sell the crops to it and
Oh yeah,
whatever's on
absolutely,
it.
absolutely. You know, and the church had industries too. The church had businesses. The church was involved in all kinds of economic activities. Yeah, the church made money in lots of ways, and of course, all tax-free, all tax-free. So yeah, the church made a lot of money in France before the Revolution.
Churches were like the biggest drug dealers back then. They really were.
You said the biggest drug dealers?
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, the church was like the biggest drug dealer of the whole.
Well, there's more than one way to look at it, but yeah, the church was certainly
They were selling
criticized
something that
that.
everybody couldn't get off of, which was something to live for.
Yeah, we're selling salvation. That's exactly right. That's right. Yeah, that's an interesting way of looking at it. Well, Marx did call our religion the opium of the masses. So you make a good point on that. Good observation. Napoleon was the first French leader to declare universal public education. All French children are to go to school. All French children are to go to school. Regardless of status or anything else.
He was the first French emperor?
Yeah.
Who paid for it?
Taxes. You know, the French people will pay for it.
Same things here.
Yeah, you know, public education.
He was the first French emperor to do what with public education?
Yeah.
He allowed it?
No, he declared it. He created it. And the curriculum will be secular, meaning it will not be a religious curriculum. It is going to be based on Enlightenment values. Real science, real history, not influenced by religious belief.
The curriculum will be off what?
So they would
Secular.
have taught evolution.
What's that?
They would have
Well,
taught- they would
Napoleon
have
said,
theory.
the church is certainly, the church is very scientific in many respects. This idea that the church is anti-science isn't necessarily true. But the idea is we're going to teach Enlightenment, rationality, logic. We're going to have a curriculum that is based on that. And so in science class, we will teach science. We're not going to come in there and say, you crammed all those animals on a boat. This is science class. So that's the reason behind that. There's no distinction among the classes. Now remember, under the old regime, everybody has a place in society that they are born into. Everybody has a role to play based on your status at birth. If you are a peasant, you are expected to live as a peasant, right? If you are born a nobleman, you are expected to live as a nobleman. And so the Louis would not have seen universal public education as something that was compatible with the way they sought to govern. There is no reason for a child of a peasant farmer to become educated. A child of a peasant farmer needs to learn how to be a peasant farmer. That is the place that you have been put into. That's what God chose for you. And so Napoleon says you are not determined by birth. Your birth is not a reflection of what you are going to do with your life. You are supposed to be whatever you choose to be, And the more educated we can make the French people, the better off we're going to be.
Did they change the calendar and the clocks back?
Yes, Napoleon will end up changing back, but not everything. He doesn't get rid of the metric system entirely, but he does get rid of the goofy calendar and the goofy clocks. Yes, he got rid of that. But the metric system, of course, remained in place in other respects. And so, universal public education, everybody pays for it, everybody goes to school, and it is secular. And it is secular. And of course, he's going to be the one that effectively picks the curriculum, right? He's going to be the one that says this is what we need to teach. So we can be good with that. And it looks like we're out of time. So I will see everybody later. Y'all take care.
Hey, can I have a